3 weeks after we brought our son home, the baby monitor started picking up a second breathing pattern next to his. Not static, not interference, breathing. Slow, steady, matching his own breath almost perfectly. Except it was coming from somewhere the monitor's camera couldn't reach. My name doesn't matter here. What matters is my son, Noah, 3 weeks old, and the baby monitor sitting on his dresser 6 feet from his crib. Standard model. Camera, microphone, a small screen my husband Ryan and I kept on our nightstand so we could check on him without walking down the hall every 20 minutes. The first 2 weeks were normal. Crying, feeding, the usual chaos of a newborn. Nothing on that monitor gave either of us a single reason to think twice about it. That changed on night 16. I woke around 2 a.m. to a sound coming through the monitor speaker. Low, tuneless humming, barely audible under the static. Not Noah. Babies don't hum. I sat up immediately, certain Ryan had gone in to check on him without telling me. He was asleep beside me. I grabbed the monitor screen. Noah was alone in his crib, asleep exactly as he should be. The humming continued for another 10 seconds after I was already staring at the empty room, then cut off mid-note, like someone had simply stopped. I told myself it was interference. A baby monitor picking up a neighbor's radio, a stray frequency. I'd read that happen sometimes. I went down the hall myself, just to be sure. Noah's room was exactly as we'd left it. Nightlight on, mobile still, nothing out of place. I stood there longer than I needed to, scanning corners I had no real reason to suspect. Nothing. I went back to bed and didn't mention it to Ryan. New parents hear things. I told myself that twice before I actually believed it enough to fall back asleep. 4 nights later, it happened again, except this time it wasn't humming. I woke to the monitor's audio, picking up 2 distinct breathing patterns. Noah's, quick and shallow the way newborns breathe, and a second one, slower, deeper, matching his rhythm almost exactly, like something breathing alongside him on purpose. I was in his room in under a minute. Noah was fine, sleeping soundly. Nothing else in that room breathes. I stood over his crib, listening to my own heartbeat, trying to convince myself I'd imagined a sound coming through a cheap speaker at 2 a.m. The second breathing didn't stop when I entered the room. I heard it continue for 3 more seconds, live, standing right there, before it faded out completely. I told Ryan the next morning. He listened, concerned, and did what any reasonable person does. Pulled up the monitor's manual on his phone, found a forum thread about audio interference in cheap baby monitors, picking up sounds from other devices in the house. It was a reasonable explanation. I wanted to believe it. I did believe it for about 4 more days, until Ryan heard it himself. He was up with Noah for a 3 a.m. feeding when he heard the humming directly, not through the monitor this time, but faintly from somewhere in the room itself while he sat there holding our son. He told me afterward his first thought was that I'd left a phone playing music somewhere nearby. He checked the dresser, the closet shelf, even Noah's diaper bag. Nothing. The humming stopped the moment he stood up to look for its source, the same way it always seemed to know when it was being searched for. What he didn't tell me until later, because he said he didn't want to sound insane, was that for a few seconds before the humming stopped, he felt it. Not heard, felt. A pressure change in the room, like a door opening somewhere in the house even though every door was shut. A shift in the air that made the hair on his arms stand up before his conscious mind had caught up to why. That was the first night Ryan didn't argue with me about what we were hearing. 2 nights later, I came downstairs for water around 1 a.m. and found the nursery rocking chair had been moved. Not far, maybe 8 inches from where it always sat, angled now to face the crib directly instead of the window, the way I always left it. I stood in the doorway staring at it for a long time, trying to remember if I'd moved it myself that day and simply forgotten. I hadn't. I keep that chair in the same spot obsessively, a habit from childproofing the room before Noah was even born. Ryan confirmed he hadn't touched it either. We stood there together, staring at 8 inches of moved furniture, both of us fully aware of how insane it would sound to say out loud that this frightened us more than the humming had. My mother-in-law, Carol, came to help for a few days that week. On her second night, she mentioned something over coffee, carefully, like she wasn't sure she should. She said the house reminded her of somewhere she'd lived decades earlier. Not this house specifically, but the feeling of it. She said in that old house, she used to hear humming some nights too, always near her own children's rooms, always stopping the instant she checked. She said once, only once, she'd actually seen something. A shape, low near the floor, gone before she could focus on it, and she'd never told anyone, not even my father-in-law, because she was certain no one would believe her. She said she'd never told anyone that before. She said she didn't know why she was telling me now, except that she'd rather I hear it from her than find out some other way. On her last night with us, Carol herself woke everyone at 4 a.m., standing frozen in the hallway outside Noah's door, insisting she'd watch the doorknob turn on its own from inside her guest room down the hall, though the door itself never opened. 2 nights after Carol left, the monitor picked up something that wasn't humming and wasn't breathing. Words, faint, low, not directed at Noah in any tone an adult uses with a baby. More like someone speaking quietly to themselves or to someone else entirely in a room where only my son was supposed to be. I couldn't make out what was said. I only caught the cadence of it, 3 or 4 words, repeated twice, then silence. I was already moving before the silence finished. Ryan was right behind me. This time, for the first time, I didn't stop at the doorway. I ran the length of the hallway hard enough that I nearly slammed into the doorframe, flashlight app already open on my phone, sweeping it across every inch of that room before my eyes had even fully adjusted. Noah's room was empty except for him, sound asleep, completely undisturbed. We stood in that doorway together for a long time, neither of us saying what we were both thinking, that whatever was speaking in that room had stopped the exact moment we started moving toward it, the same way it always did. Ryan checked the closet, pulling every hanging garment aside individually. I checked behind the curtains, under the crib, inside the empty diaper pail, anywhere a person could reasonably hide. Several places where no person reasonably could. Nothing. The room was small. There was nowhere for anyone to actually be. We left the hallway light on for the rest of that night, both of us too unsettled to fully sleep, taking turns sitting awake near Noah's door until morning. The next morning, changing Noah's crib sheet, I found something on the inside rail of the crib. A faint mark, like condensation that had dried, in a shape too deliberate to be accidental. Almost a handprint, but smaller than an adult's and larger than a child's, pressed into the wood grain like something had rested its hand there for a long time. I photographed it before I could talk myself out of believing I'd actually seen it. When I looked again an hour later to show Ryan, the mark had visibly changed, fainter in the center, as though it were slowly drying and disappearing on its own, though the room's humidity hadn't changed at all according to the small thermometer we kept on the wall. By that evening, it was gone entirely. Only the photograph proved it had ever existed. Ryan stared at that photo for a long time and didn't say anything. That night, I set my phone to record the monitor screen directly, propped against my nightstand lamp, hoping to catch whatever we kept missing. Around 1 a.m., the recording caught something for exactly one frame. I didn't see it live. I found it the next day, scrubbing through the footage frame by frame, after Ryan pointed out something looked different near the crib rail. A shape, low to the ground, close to where the mark had been found, gone in the very next frame. Not fully formed enough to call a figure, just a density in the dark that hadn't been there a half second before and wasn't there a half second after. But in that single frame, if you look closely enough, there was the unmistakable suggestion of an arm reaching toward the crib rail, fingers just barely extended. I watched that single frame more times than I want to admit. Ryan eventually asked me to stop. I want to be clear that none of this happened only at night. About a week after the camera footage, I was folding laundry in the nursery during the afternoon, sunlight fully in the room, when every one of Noah's mobile animals spun slowly in place at the same moment. All four of them, with no draft, no open window, no fan running anywhere in the house. I stood there holding a folded onesie, watching four small stuffed animals turn in unison in broad daylight, and I understood for the first time that whatever this was didn't need darkness at all. Darkness had just been when we were paying enough attention to notice it. I spent the next several days doing what I probably should have done before we ever moved in, actually researching the house's history beyond the basic disclosure paperwork. I found a name eventually, an elderly woman who lived in the house alone for the final years before it was sold. No children, no family listed in any record I could find. Nothing dramatic, nothing that explained a second breathing pattern or a handprint too small for an adult. I called the agent who'd handled the estate sale, asking carefully, "The way you ask something you're afraid sounds insane out loud." She paused before answering, then said only that the woman had, according to neighbors, kept a nursery set up in that exact room for a grandchild who visited rarely, and that after the woman passed, the room had sat untouched for nearly 2 years before the house went up for sale. I pushed a little further this time. She admitted reluctantly that the cleaning crew hired before the sale had refused to finish working in that specific room, and that a second crew had been brought in to complete it instead. She didn't know why, or hadn't asked. I didn't push for more than that. Ryan and I made a decision after that call, one I still don't know was entirely rational. We moved a mattress into Noah's room and stayed there ourselves that night, both of us awake, watching. Around 2 a.m., the humming started again, closer than it had ever sounded on the monitor, seeming to come from the exact corner where the handprint had been found. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Noah, remarkably, slept through all of it, undisturbed, the way he always had. The humming continued for almost a full minute this time, longer than ever before. Then, in the dim edge of the nightlight's glow, I watched the rocking chair begin to move, slowly on its own. The same slight angle it had shifted to that first night, rocking gently as though something unseen had just sat down in it to watch alongside us. It rocked 4 times, then stopped completely all at once, like a hand had reached out and stilled it. In the days after, Ryan and I pieced together what we'd been too afraid to say out loud individually. The humming, the breathing, the words, the moved chair, none of it had ever escalated toward anything aggressive. It never came when we were both in the room together during the day, except that once, in full sunlight, as though it wanted us to know it could. We came to believe, without any way to prove it, that whatever had been in that room wasn't hunting Noah. It was watching him the way it may once have watched a grandchild who rarely came to visit, filling a space that had sat empty for 2 years before we ever moved in, rocking in a chair that had likely once been rocked by someone who loved a child very much and rarely got the chance to. That didn't make it less frightening. It only changed what kind of frightening it was. We still live in that house. Noah is older now, walking, talking, and the monitor sits unused in a drawer, replaced by a simpler one with no camera, no screen, nothing that might catch something we'd rather not see again. The humming still happens, rarely, maybe once every few months, always near his room, always stopping the moment either of us moves toward it. The rocking chair still sits at that same 8-inch angle facing the crib because neither Ryan nor I have ever been able to bring ourselves to move it back. Noah has never once seemed bothered by any of it. If anything, some nights I've caught him humming back, quietly, a tune neither Ryan nor I ever taught him. I've asked him carefully where he learned it. He just smiles the way toddlers do when a question doesn't fully make sense to them yet and hums it again. I've stopped asking,